Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to address the witnesses. I'm going to get right into it. Obviously, pensions are an issue. The Equitas Society is still fighting the pension problem. Now, the option for pensions in this budget, there's no timeline on the government's commitment to return an option, or they're talking about an option. The Prime Minister never spoke about an option. Would you agree with that?
I would agree that my understanding of the Prime Minister's promise, what we call the sacred obligation, was a return to lifelong pensions. There's only one lifelong pension to return to, and that is the former Pension Act.
And is that clear among the veteran community as well?
No, the veteran community is extremely concerned. I'm extremely concerned that what in fact is going to happen is the trial balloon that's been floated, which is the idea of taking the pain and suffering lump sum, which is a distinct pillar, separate and apart from financial security for life, and trying to turn that lump sum, which was specific to the pain and suffering, into some form of an amortized pension. It makes no sense. It would be hundreds of dollars a month. That's not something you can live on, and it does not provide financial security for life like income replacement and the cost of being crippled do.
Right. So I want to talk about transition services as well, because in this budget it spoke about transition availability for spouses and common law partners. And Mr. Brassard, this is to you. There's been 10 parliamentary studies done, the latest in 2016 by the Veterans Affairs Committee, with strong recommendations on how we can ease the transition of medically released service members into transition life. D&D Ombudsman did a report. The Veterans Ombudsman did a report. In fact, the Veterans Affairs Committee report was endorsed and supported by the D&D and Veterans Ombudsman. Now there's a new study that's going on by Shaping Futures. Granted, the government is not paying for this, but there is some suspicion that this is going to punt the issue of these recommendations down the road so that the government doesn't have to commit to it at this point, in spite of the platitudes and the niceties and all that stuff. Are you concerned about this new study, that we're not actually going to be able to help our veterans transition properly and that they're just punting it down the road?
I've seen enough study and enough research. I've been to one of these SIMBRA conferences, and they love their research money and they want to divide that apple a million and one ways. We're sick and tired of the research. Give us the apple, right? It's time. The statement from the ombudsmans about that they want to have all your benefits in place before release, I honestly don't know how they're ever going to get there, because here I am 11 years later and just recently finally got approved for a traumatic brain injury 11 years later. And many young veterans aren't as good a fighter as I am. 90% of them have too much pride to even want to fight more than one appeal. Like, enough of this. I'm not going to deal with this. I want to be proud of my medals, and I don't want to have to live out constantly reviewing and fighting things.
I want to speak about the earnings loss benefit and the reaction among the veterans community that they're not getting as much as they thought they were going to get because of the indexing. Could you comment on that?
Well, top-up of the lump sum for pain and suffering, in fact. Yeah, $360,000 is the courts, the benchmark for the courts in Canada for pain and suffering. There is general agreement, at least in the Policy Advisory Group, there was almost unanimous agreement that figure is adequate for dealing with pain and suffering, because it's reflective of what your average Canadian receives for pain and suffering, and my pain and suffering is no more important than your pain and suffering. Pain and suffering is pain and suffering. The way the lump sum top-up was actually implemented, by taking the consumer price index and applying it, resulted in less than half of what people were expecting to receive. So there was a serious problem with managing expectations right up front, and we didn't find out about the consumer price indexing application to the lump sum top-up until literally days before it was announced.
It wasn't announced. Our veteran community were finding out from their case managers, and then the day before the budget day and formal announcement of it, I had to corner the veteran ombudsman. I had to redirect 3 questions before I finally got out of them that it's going to be less than half. So.
Okay, that's it. I'm going to allow